Welcome to Long Blue Leadership, the podcast where we share insights on leadership through the lives and experiences of Air Force Academy graduates. I'm Navir Walkowitz, class of 99. My guest today is Jake DeRuyter, class of 15, currently an account executive with Impress Technology and the president of the Central Texas chapter of the Association of Graduates, quite possibly our youngest graduate to do so. He is second-generation Air Force, following his father, a graduate from the class of 85, and uncle, class of 87, from our Air Force Academy, the only school that he applied to after high school. We'll talk about those things, Jake's leadership journey, and a particular crossroad he arrived at when he had 1 hour to decide his entire life. Jake, welcome to Long Blue Leadership, and I'd like to dive right in. 1 hour to decide your entire life, what's that about?
Yeah, so my second semester, first year, I was dealing with some pretty significant back issues, and didn't realize how severe it was. So I'm in the flight dock. It was either the Monday, the week before, or the week of graduation, and the doctor's like, "Hey, like you're gonna need back surgery to remove the bulging disc in your back." I'm like, "Okay, great. Like I can barely walk, so sign me up. Whatever you can do to make me feel better." And they're like, "Well, like." You're not gonna be able to keep your pilot slot if you proceed with the surgery. And like, I'm not gonna lie and say it was like my end all like dream to be a pilot. But you go through all 4 years thinking you're gonna fly, like you're pretty fired up for it. We're a week away from graduation, and that's like, hey, rug is just pulled, and but I mean, I had to make a decision right there where it's like, hey, I'd rather be able to walk and be pain free than fly. And so. Um, that was a pretty easy decision at that point, and then the next part is what you alluded to is where things got a little tricky. So, being just a couple days before walking across the stage and, saluting the Secretary of the Air Force, they're like, "Hey," I'm like, "So what's my job gonna be?" Like, I don't even know what else is available in the Air Force. I didn't have to focus on this. And, they're like, "Well, I'm just the flight doc, like, go talk to, the, personnel office, over in Vandy, and they'll get you taken care of." So, I, walk on or hobble on over there, and, I'm like, "Hey, like, Jake DeRuyter, like, I told the, flight doc just gave you all a call to, get me a new job, like, what's my life look like? What are we doing next?" And, she just goes, "Well, there was the big missileer crisis, and we're really desperate for missileers, so, like, you're gonna be missiles now." And I'm just like, my jaw dropped, like, out the gate, like,
Not what you expected to hear.
not what I wanted, and, like, not to, like, downplay missiles, just, not what I saw and, wanted to join the Air Force to do, right? And so I'm just, like, standing there in shock, and she's like, "So are you okay?" And I'm like, "I kinda wanna, like, jump off, my room on top of Andy, but, like, it's gonna be fine." Like, I'd like, get some preferences, like, do I, like, have any say in this? Like, just assigning me that just kinda seems aggressive. She goes, "Well, like, I guess I can take your preferences down." And I'm just like, "Why didn't you lead with that? Like, that would've been great." And so she's like, "Well, I need to submit these, like, right now. So, like, what do you wanna do?" I'm like, like, what are my options? I don't even know what other AFSCs there are. So that like becomes a very frantic hour of me calling all my teachers. I was a management major. Highly recommend that. Greatest one of the best decisions of my life was going to the management department, and I call my teachers like, hey, like stick with something business related, like contracting, acquisitions, finance. Like if you put one of those three down, like you're guaranteed to do it. I'm like, "Oh, okay, sweet. Sounds like a sure bet to me. Like, that sounds easy enough." But they made you put down 5, and, you always hear the horror stories where if you don't put down something, it defaults to, like, needs of the Air Force, right?
Right.
So, I think I put down, like, PA just because I was like, "There's no way they'll pick me for that." Like, there's barely any PA officers, and I, for the life of me, couldn't tell you what I put in the 5th spot. Um, and so, like, I walk out of there, like, I'm kinda dejected. I'm like, "Man, like, my whole life just changed in the span of an hour." No idea what the next I don't know where I'm gonna be living. I don't know what my job's
Right.
gonna be. Like, what in the world's going on? So, like, the next day, like, we're all sitting at, like, one of those, like, final briefings, "Hey, here's how you PCS. Here's how you do XYZ." Like, right as, like, the meeting's about to kick off, that same tech sergeant, God, I give her a big hug now. She walks up to me with some paperwork and says, "Congratulations, sir." And, like, I'm looking at her like the person that just told me my life was over the day before, so I'm not exactly happy to see this person. And then I look at, like, the paper, and it just says Goodfellow Air Force Base. I had no idea where in the world that was, like, what job that was or anything. I just knew it wasn't Vandenberg from missile air training, so I just look at her and go, "I'm not missiles." She's like, "Congrats, so you're not missiles." So I stand up, give her a big ol' hug, They're trying to start the briefing. They're like, "Sir, like, please sit down." I'm just like, "Sorry, I'm too happy right now." So, yeah, that started me off on my journey to San Angelo, Texas, which, didn't really know what I was getting into there. But yeah, going Intel, kinda led me to where I am now in life, and, looking back on it now, like, all the, crazy things that happened, like, it put me where I am now, and so, like, very thankful, where the things, or how they all ended up, and, putting me in the position to where I can give back to the community now, and really, serve the Air Force and the fellow grads in a much better capacity than I ever could have, while on active duty.
Well, it's so interesting because, you think about the Air Force Academy as a place where they teach you to be able to, make decisions on the fly or, to make the best calculated decision you can at the time. What leadership lessons do you think you called upon in that frantic moment of, well, not only can you not be a pilot now because we're going to have this surgery, but now you have to pick an AFSC. What do you think you drew upon to guide you through that in a kind of a leadership manner?
Yeah, the biggest thing was just, like, staying calm and just, like, realizing, like, "Okay, like, whatever's happened. I can't change the past." Like, I can only deal, like, with the information I've given and, like, push forward. Like, I could sit there and, get upset with myself or upset at the world, but, like, that doesn't do anything. Like, it's like, "Alright, how do we take action? How do we take that next step to get over this?" Because, like, you wanna be in control of your life as much as possible going forward, right? And choosing your AFSC arguably is probably one of the biggest things you could possibly choose in life, next to your spouse and things like that, right? And that determines, however, what your entire Air Force career is going to be. So yeah, doing that in an hour was definitely very frantic, but um, like one of the biggest things I really like pride myself on and really want to encourage others is like, the connections you make like throughout your academy experience through active duty in your life. Like those are the people that are gonna, help you in those dark times, those tough times. And like, lean on those people. And like the only way you can lean on them is if you like prove to them that they can lean on you when they need help, right? As that's like one of the things I like make a pillar in my life is like, hey,
Uh-huh.
like when those friends are like in a dark time, like I want to be the one that like, hey, like I'll be there for you. Like, that's always one thing I'm like been passionate about and what I centered my leadership philosophy around.
I love that. I think, you kind of hit on it, right? You have this network. And I imagine your family's part of that. Your dad being a graduate, what role did he play in, this moment in your life? And how did you navigate that with him?
Yeah, he was awesome. And he was, a big reason why I went to the academy. He always did a really good job of like, putting that as an option, but not like forcing it or not shoving it down my throat. And was really thankful to him for, the life me and my sister had growing up and all the crazy places we moved to and everything. And, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, as you hinted in the preview. Like I didn't apply anywhere else because I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And he was like, hey, like the academy, was always a great place, and worst case scenario, and tell you what to do. And he's like, hey, if you want a similar life to the way you grew up, like, I attribute everything to that, and that's kind of what led me there. So yeah, you better believe after a call on my teachers to figure out what AFC I should do, he was my next call to be like, hey, I knew you always wanted me to fly, but that's not working anymore. So what do you think? So yeah, no, he's been a tremendous help my entire life. I mean, yeah, I talk to him, at least every week. So yeah, huge help there.
That's amazing. So you went on to be an intel officer, and what was that like? And then how did you decide that it was going to be um, time to move on to, transitioning out of the military?
Yeah, so Intel wasn't exactly a great fit for me and what I was like trying to do. When you're told Intel, I knew nothing, so I'm like, oh, I'll be a spy, I'll be James Bond, I'll be the CIA. Like none of those were remotely true. So I got stationed in San Antonio, Texas, for my first job, which was great. I love San Antonio. I worked with some amazing people. Our mission was a little funky. We were doing defensive cyber ops as it was kind of standing up. So doing intel support for a mission that doesn't really know what they're doing is a little difficult at the time. Now, knock on wood, hopefully things have gotten a lot better since I was there. But building the plane as you're flying was our always moniker that we would use, um, and so it was definitely challenging. And then a lot of it just felt like doing homework and like giving briefings over and over again. So a lot of hours in the skiff, doing researching on different cyber threats and then going and briefing the commanders. It was a cool job. I learned a ton. It's but not wasn't very fulfilling for me. I want to, get out, like, be more helpful to other people, and like have more of a direct impact. And so that led me to teaching ROTC at Texas State, which was a great 3 years. and really kind of re-blued me and love that job. Can't recommend it enough for people that are looking to take a break from their career field. But then when they said, "Hey, like you got to go back to Intel," that was kind of my big decision, or my the point where I was like, "All right, I don't think a active duty career is left in the cards for me. I'm gonna take my next step moving on."
So that's you even talked about before you decided to transition out of the Air Force, you pivoted within your career field and took, a temporary job, outside of your career field as an ROTC instructor, and you said it re-blued you. Talk about that and what how did it grow you as a leader? I mean, what did you learn about yourself in that?
I learned that I really cared about the people more than the operational mission. And so, building up the people, building out the future lieutenants, like, hey, that's how I can better serve the Air Force. And the whole reason I got the job because they had to give a waiver for me because I was technically still a lieutenant, which was not allowed. But I was really upfront with my leadership and my intel job. And they knew I didn't, love the career field and I wasn't really a good fit for that world. But they're like, "Hey, like, Jake's out great at recruiting. He's good at getting people to go out and do things and, like, help others. Like, he'd be a natural fit there." So they called, all the ROTC leadership to vouch for me to get that job. And then, one of the biggest things, like, I took away is, like, when you go to the academy, like, if you're in the academy, like, you're in. Like, you have a spot in the Air Force, assuming, you pass all your classes, you don't get kicked out for XYZ reasons, or, like, and then you'll have a job. ROTC is completely different. Like you could have 4.0, max your PT scores, everything, like be the perfect cadet. And then the Air Force decides like, hey, like we're only taking 40% this year, which happened my second year in the job. And we just had to lose half of our class.
Ooh,
Uh, so like learning to like deal with that, like rejection when there's nothing that you personally could have done was really challenging. And a ton of mentorship sessions with the cadets and hey, what are second and tertiary options, things like that. And kind of like what I did where it's like, hey, like you're going to be the doors gonna get slammed in your face over and over again in life. How do you respond to that resiliency and then that flexibility to adapt and overcome? I mean, those are stuff I'll take with me for the rest of my life.
wow. And so you got to be a mentor in a way for those, Air Force ROTC cadets if they didn't get a slot and kind of navigating. And then you found yourself in that seat when you decided to transition yourself, right?
Yeah. So they were gonna send me to another Intel role, and I'm like, I had just met my wife at the time. We were gonna get married soon. I'm like, man, like the time to deploy and kind of live the Air Force life isn't my main goal anymore. So, uh, and so when I try to push out my separation date as long as possible, so I had time to do the job search and really see what else is out there. And I didn't really like know what I wanted to be once again. But I was like, hey, I love living here in Austin, Texas. Like, figure I can get something, tech related or sales related. That's kind of very like naturally inclined to both of those things. And one of my classmates, Keith Link, yeah, he reached out to me because I host a big March Madness pool every year for a ton of grads. And he's like, hey man, like just started this role here. Like I think you'd be a great fit for the company. We're trying to build out our Air Force team. Our boss is a Navy grad. Would you be interested in interviewing with us? And then I was like, yeah, man, that sounds great. I'd still be working with the Air Force, in a tech slash sales type role. I'm like, yeah, this is everything that I wanted. It sounds awesome. Having once again no idea what I was getting into. But I go through the interview process, and I'm trying to sell myself on SkillBridge, trying to get that free internship, saying like, hey, I could be a free worker for y'all for a couple of months here. Trying to sell myself. And at the end of the interview process, John Podolak, 87 Navy grad, I believe. He's like, "Hey, Jake, like, you've had a bunch of people, vouch for you. I really believe in the grad network. Doesn't matter which academy you went to." He said, "Hey, if you're gonna come and do SkillBridge with us, like, I want you to know, like, you have a job offer at the end of it." And like, he handed me my job offer right there. I think we were 4 months out, so
Wow.
I was in shock. I like to this day, I can't like believe it. He took the risk on me, like coming fresh in a completely separate career field, no background besides being able to speak Air Force. Um, and it all goes back to, our long blue line. I don't know what Navy calls it, but it's a hey, we all have similar backgrounds.
Long
Like we
Blue
all,
Navy line, maybe? I'm not sure.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's like, hey, I know I could put trust in you because your background, what you're all about, and that's something that I like really internalized and leading to my now role. Now it's like, hey, like, we're we'll give you the benefit of doubt if you're a fellow grad, right? Doesn't matter which academy, in particular, we're going to favor the Air Force. But yeah, that's like one thing I just really want to make a pillar of my life. Like I said earlier, is like, hey, I want to help out fellow grads because if it wasn't for Keith and John taking a risk on me out of the blue, I wouldn't be where I am today.
It seems like that's been a thread in your life, uh, finding a network and supporting and taking care of people, and and then seeing that reciprocated to help continue to fuel that is important to you. Talk a little bit about what that transition was like, though, because it almost sounds too easy. I mean, has it been just rainbows since you kind of took that leap?
Oh god, no. Year one, uh, year one, in any career field, especially a sales driven one, it's a challenge. You don't know what you're doing. You're a fish out of water. You're just like I was going to a million different Air Force bases, just walking on base trying to meet people, really not even knowing what I was doing, let alone convincing other people what we do. Um, and so that was a challenge. I think I went to 19 different bases my first year. Just I was on a plane every chance I could get, just trying to make a name for myself and say, "Hey, I'm Jake DeRuyter. We can do anything to help you. What do you need?" And people are always like, "Well, we don't need anything. Like, we want one specific thing. Like, can you do this?" And so, yeah, you really kind of have to find yourself because, in the Air Force, especially as an officer, you're leading a team, right? Or you're part of some overarching team. But in this role, when I started, it was me, myself, and I. And so that was just a huge lifestyle change where it was a little refreshing. That's like, hey, I don't have to worry about my cadets or my airmen, outside of the job, and that's something. It was a nice refresh. But like everything else, it's like, hey, like I am the only one providing for my family, like to pay the bills, everything like that. Like, it's how hard am I going to work, and how am I going to put in the effort to grind, day in and day out. Just getting good at any job. You can't just have one great day just like working out. Like you can't just have one great day and expect to bench 500 pounds, right? It's
Right.
that it's the things that you do day in and day out, and like that building up the right habits and having the right like communication with people, and then just being relatable. Like one of the other biggest things, it's like say you're going to do something and follow up and do it. Like we always joke that there's a lot. Well, it's a weird that it's a skill to like follow up with people and respond to them in like a meaningful time. It shouldn't be, but, like, that's just one of those things where it's like, "Hey, people need help, and, like, we wanna be the ones that are there." And it's just like, alright, like, doing that over and over again. Because man, that year 1, like, I was like, "Why did I pick this job? Why did I pick this career choice?" Like, I should have gone into consulting. I should have started literally anything else. And thank God I stuck with it because it's, again, been one of the greatest decisions I've made, and we have an awesome team, but we've brought in a few other academy grads with us as well, and it's been a lot of fun since.
May I ask why you stuck with it when it and everything against in your core was, why did I do this? I could have picked anything else. Why did you stay?
I I I really wanted to prove it to myself and really prove it to Keith and then John, where it's like they took the risk on me, so I didn't want to let them down, and I think that was the biggest thing where it's like, hey, like you guys took the risk on me out of the blue, and like Keith and I were classmates, but we were never close, right? Like we barely kept in touch over the years, and it's just like, hey, like you stuck your name out to a company. Like this is the real world, right? Like, you know, uh, in the Air Force, like if you want the full 20 years, you can do 20 years, right? Like, in the real world, it's, hey, if you're not, if you're not performing, it's, have a nice day. You got to find new employment. Um, and so I was like, I'm not going to let you guys down. I'm going to fight for this. Like in being a small company, we're not a big name brand, right? No one knows who we are. And so it's a little bit of that underdog mentality, and just like, hey, like, how am I going to out hustle the next guy? How am I going to out hustle XYZ company that's a competitor? And it's just that competitive drive that I just always had, where it's just like, I'm not playing sports every day anymore. But like, how do you still stay competitive and still stay active and still have that drive to, be the best you can be and go on and go forth?
Well, it sounds like, this competitive drive is you said it was something you've always had. Can you share a story from, when you recall when, gosh, even something, back in early Jake days, that this is a moment I realized, like, I'm a competitive person. I'm driven by, this desire to prove myself. Is there something that pops to mind? Because I can only just imagine if it was already part of your core, when you kind of knew this about yourself.
No, I've got a good one. So, my dad was coaching with the academy going into my junior year of high school, and his goal was always like to get me all 3 years at one school, which we had at the time we had never lived anywhere longer than 3 years in a row, so that was a tough task. And just finished up my junior year of playing football, and things were going good. And then he gets a job offer down in Texas, and he comes to me. He's like, "Hey, what do you think? Like, I don't want to move you going into your senior year, but like, want to talk to you first before I make any decisions. And I'm like, wait, I get the chance to play Texas high school football? Like, are you kidding me? Like, like let's do this. I get 1 year
Wow.
for it. That's awesome. So, yeah, that's the number one story that comes to my mind, where it's like, hey, like I want to take the risk on myself and be competitive, and go play the best of the best.
Right, play with the best of the best, and that does seem to be a theme, right? Air Force Academy, putting yourself out there, jumping in full
Mm.
feet into this new role. What have you learned about yourself? You talked about motivating. It's different when you have people that you have to take care of.
Mhm.
And I guess maybe your translation is your family you have to take care of. But how do you motivate yourself when it's a you, yourself, and you?
Yeah.
You said me, myself, and I. I couldn't think of the other way to say it. But when it's just you, um, what keeps you motivated, Jake?
Yeah, I definitely am very externally motivated. So it's my team, when you want to talk about like the Monday through Friday grind, and then yeah, my wife and like the overarching family. Like growing up, family's always been really close and a huge motivator for me. And just always want to be able to provide for others and provide for myself, and never want to have to worry about that next meal or like the job, employment, things like that. And just saying like, hey, like these opportunities you get, they're don't take it for granted. And it's like you got to fight and earn everything. You're not just gonna be handed out anything. And it's just, um, that's just something always in the back of my mind, where it's like if I'm not doing it, like somebody else is going to. I'm gonna lose that
Mm,
opportunity, or someone's gonna step in, right? And so it's just one thing where it's just like, hey, like being like the academy grad, like we'll live up to the name brand. That's another huge thing I always have in my head. It's like I want to represent the brand well, and like how do you do that? And it's because like we've all met those people. It's like, hey man, like like shoot, like I really like you, but like I don't think you represent us well. I never want to be that type of person.
right.
And so that's like one of those things I just really like to keep me going day in and day out.
So the daily grind, you said in the first year, you think you visited like 19 bases just to try and
Yeah.
figure it out. What does the daily grind look like now?
Yeah, completely changed, thankfully. I really only focus on 3, which still has me plenty busy, but at least I'm not in, all these crazy places, which is nice. Um, yeah, now it's weird because I set my own schedule. No one's ever asking, "Hey, you gotta be here at 7:30 and clock out at 4:30." It's a complete polar opposite of the Air Force. Like, if I wanna go golf every Friday at noon, like, no one's stopping me from doing that except for, "Hey, that'd probably be a detriment, to my team, and our success," right? And so it's this complete mindset change where it's like, hey, I'm gonna still put in, full day's work, and get everything I can out of the day. But it's, it may not just, I'm not sitting down at my desk. So when I'm home, I'm following up with teams, doing, making sure everything is good internally at the company, and then a lot of the time on the road. So I go to Eglin Air Force Base a lot, Hill Air Force Base, and Edwards. Those are my 3 where I'm constantly rotating through. So if anyone's at those bases, please let me know. I'd love to reach out to you guys, grab a beer, dinner, or anything. It's a lot of lonely nights in the hotel. So every chance I get to meet up with fellow grads, see what else is going on, I love taking advantage of that opportunity. I've done that numerous times, and that's like one of my favorite things and one of my favorite parts of the job. So I don't know what a standard day looks like for me. That's one thing I love about this job, and kind of that's why I stuck with it. So I'm never bored. No day is the same. You're always finding a new opportunity, someone new to talk to. Some new base, a new program. That there's infinite possibilities. It's such a big Air Force, and like it gives me a chance to stay involved with our community, give back, and just hey, like if there's another grad out there that's like looking to separate and needs a job, like any grad, I've offered this plenty of times and stepped through it. Any grad that's trying to separate, you have an instant interview at a minimum with us right away. Yeah, please reach out anytime.
That's amazing. I think, you talk about there is no standard, but maybe you actually, the standard is that you hold yourself to a standard so that you're seeking opportunities when they're there, you're prepared, and you're trying to connect with other grads and make ways for them as well, or at least a potential opportunity. Let's talk about that because I find it, you're a 2015 graduate, you're in your career trajectory and you've made time to become the chapter president for the Central Texas chapter. And, chapter service is that's when you bring grads together. I don't know how you manage that as well as build a business. Let's talk about that. How did that even happen?
Yeah. So Mike Lambert started our chapter. He's a 70 grad, one of the coolest, most like informative, just like unique individuals. Like he is the greatest guy. Now I wish I could live half the life that he has when I get to be his age. And I reached out to him a couple years ago now, saying like, hey, like the baseball team's in town playing UT. We have plans like to all go to it. Like what's going on? Because this is bad on me. I didn't know that the chapter existed at the time. Um, and he's like, "Oh shoot, like I didn't know about it. Yeah, that sounds great. Like, yeah, let's." He's like, "I'll send out a message. Like, let's start like rallying people to go as like a big group." I think we got maybe 20, 30 people. It was a decent showing. And then after he's like, "Hey, I'm looking to pass this on to somebody. Would you be interested in it?" And I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, I don't really know what it entails. And then like without me kind of having a say in it, like everyone there is like, "Oh, yeah, hey, let's all have a vote right now. Raise your hand when Jake is the next president."
Official.
Um, and Neil Went, Harry Keys, a bunch of other grads were there, all raising their hands, like, "Hey, no, here's our new president." So, yeah, I mean, I definitely wanted it, not like I didn't have a say in it, but yeah, it was nice having that like little motivational push from everybody else. And then Neil Went, he's been my VP and almost at a year going this now, so we still got a lot of work to do. We're still building a lot of things, but we're pretty proud of the steps that we've taken to kind of build this community. But yeah, it's definitely tough. You got work and then home life and then family, and then you're just like, oh shoot, I still got to do this. So I mean, we all got a million things on our plate. So it's just like the academy teaches you, how do you put 25 hours into a 24 day?
Right. So I found that curious what you'd mentioned. You said, I didn't even know we had a chapter, but you reached out to Mike Lambert. So did you already have like a mentor mentee relationship with him, or how did you know him?
No, I heard about it a little bit before that. I was like kind of like in the back of my head knew it existed. I just didn't know what all entailed, and it didn't say Austin. It just said Central Texas, so
Mm.
I didn't really know what all it meant. And then meeting with him and getting involved with him and all in the whole group that he's started and been a part of for a long time. Yeah, it's really cool hearing their stories, and we do a monthly lunch every Friday. Or every first Friday of the month, and we get to hear all the cool old war stories and everything. It's honestly like one of the things I look forward to most every month is hearing and listening into those guys. There's just so many funny connections all over the place, and yeah, it's awesome. If anyone's listening in Austin, we'll be doing it again next week, or the first Friday this upcoming month of April.
That's wonderful. So, talk a little bit about what it's been like being the chapter president. I think when we think about being times at the academy, you're leading a group of your peers, and obviously these peers are various years. But what has that been like, and what have you seen to be challenging so far?
Yeah, so it's completely different than on active duty because you have positional power, right? And your airmen, the younger officers, they got to listen to you, right? Like yeah, the chapter president sounds cool. But, like what authority do I have, right? Absolutely nothing. It's just more of hey, I'm the one coordinating and leading the charge, right? So you got to be the one to say what you're going to do and actually follow through and do it. And that's tough when you got a million other competing priorities and you're always like trying to schedule your time um, and so, I've been thankful I've had a great team that's, kept their there's been times I can't make that monthly lunch and, others fill in. So, we've had a pretty good core group there, but trying to find ways to motivate people to participate is extremely difficult, unless they have like a direct, buy-in or impact or, return on their investment. I think I saw in our last AOG election, we had like a 22%, voting rate. And so we see that at the local chapters too, where it's tough like finding people. So I'll go on LinkedIn just trolling, just like looking for anyone that says Air Force Academy grad, like in outside of any major city in Texas besides Austin. So trying to get that direct touch, but it definitely takes time and effort, and like you got to be willing to show that you're willing to go forth and put it in. Otherwise, everyone's gonna be like, "Hey, I'm just getting another spam email. Why would I listen to this?"
Right. And I just find it even more just impressive. What compelled you to reach out in the first place and say, hey, I'd like to get more involved? Because you were already doing all these things through your job. So why the additional responsibility?
Uh, I think, great question. I think it's just because like you said, I was already doing it, and so I was like, "Hey, like, this is a natural fit for what I enjoy doing and what I, like, truly care about." And as we've mentioned, like, all those grads in the past have helped me out and made me who I am today, from my dad, my teachers, the officers that are ahead of me. It's like, "Hey, like, how do I give back?"
Mm.
Because I know I wouldn't be standing where I am without our fellow grads and then the whole, overarching community. So it's like, what little can I do to make one person's life that 1% better, like, I'll
Yeah.
take that chance any day of the week.
Well, we talked about some of the challenges you've experienced and your deep desire to give back. So share a success that you've had since being chapter president and what's really kind of filled your bucket in this giving back piece.
Oh, so we did a watch party for the Air Force Army game, which that's the pretty standard chapter president stuff. Like, oh hey, you threw a watch party. No, that's not the big thing. But the really cool part was the people that showed up, and I feel horrible. I forget his name right now, but the oldest living graduate. He had his daughter drive him because he said, "Hey, I'm not going to miss this."
Wow.
Yeah. And so I was like, "Whoa!" Like that was like, I
I
mean,
kind
they
of want to
weren't
look
even.
that up myself. I'm like, that's amazing.
Yes,
Yes.
and, like, just having that moment, like, wow, that's really cool, where it's like, hey, like, that wouldn't have happened, like, without, like, the work of, like, my team, like, putting this together, and, like, yeah, like, putting it together a watch party is nothing crazy, but, like, it's still, like, just, like, hearing those stories and, like, meeting to meet those people that, were there when this first started, like, we were joking earlier, they don't even know what Founders Day is because, they were there for it, but, like, it's, that wasn't really a thing for them. Now it's like our, annual celebration, but to them, they're just like, "Oh, yeah, like, we just started it, like, that's just how it
Right.
is."
On the shoulders of giants, right?
Mhm, yes.
Jake, it just sounds like you had such an incredible ride so far, and I know your journey is in the midst of it, and I can't wait to hear how you'll continue to do so as a graduate as we support you. But right now, I'd like to ask you some specific leadership lessons. The first one really pertaining to you. What do you do every day to be a better leader?
Uh That reach out, like, always that checking in, like, I always not necessarily schedule it, but, if I ever have, like, 20, 30 minutes, nothing's on my calendar for work or, like, things on the soul, it's like, "Hey, who haven't I talked to in a while?" Like, whether it's one of my classmates, one of my freshmen, one of the people that serve with me, and then I spend a lot of time on the road, so, I'm, driving, I always try to, like, reach out and, like, call and reconnect with people that you haven't talked to in, X amount of months, um, 'cause I don't always know that, like, I really appreciate when I always hear from people like that, and so that's, like, one thing I always wanna do is, like, "Hey, what's going on in life, or where are you at now?" That's, what's so cool about the Air Force community as a whole is, like, people are moving, doing cool new jobs, all over the place. So I love getting to hear those stories and, like, truly listening in. So, like, the leadership lesson would be like, "Hey, actually listen and, like, take interest, and, like, don't just be waiting to say, don't just be waiting to, like, say what you wanna say next. Like, actually, like, hey, there's some pretty cool stories out there, and people are doing some amazing, unique things. Like, shoot, look at, Wyatt Hendrickson this weekend.
Oh my
The
goodness.
Yeah, one of the greatest college sports upsets of all time, and he's a
Of
grad,
all time,
uh,
100%. Yes, I think that's a really great way. And then, just
mm,
even like rallying together and talking about that. I mean, what a great way to come. Yeah, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. Did you see Wyatt, what he did?
yep,
It's just amazing.
yep, exactly. Yeah, Wyatt, if you're ever in Austin, drinks are on me, man, congrats.
That's outstanding. All right. So tell me then, Jake, what would you share as something that an aspiring leader can do every day? So that's something you do personally. What might you share with an aspiring leader that they can do today that will reap them benefits down the road?
Yeah, don't just worry about your own career and your own life,
Mm.
because uh, when you look at officers, coaches, a lot of people can be judged based on the people that they've built up rather than their own career. We see that all the time in coaching, and it's like if you're truly worried about the development of the guys around you, like you're going to build up yourself and your whole team and everybody, and so like make that the primary goal, not just hey, how do I get that next job? How do I get that next rank? Because that's people are going to spot that as being phony really quick. So, be genuine and like, pump up the other ones around you because, a rising tide lifts all ships.
Mm. Gosh, and like I said, you're kind of in this rise in your career and your life. If you were to look back and talk to your younger self, Jake, whether your cadet self or even your child self, is there any advice you would give yourself knowing what you know today?
Yeah. The biggest thing is be more involved.
Mm.
I think, especially as cadet and like early officer life, I was just like, how do I get through the day? Like, what do I do to, get through like the class or to get through like, the skiff life or something like that? I'm just like, how do I get to, the part of life where I'm, spending time with my friends or like having fun? I definitely wish I was much more involved, at the academy and then, as a young lieutenant, like I definitely, took things for granted back then. And, that's probably the biggest thing I changed is like, hey, like, I definitely had the extra time, like, I was I could have given back more at that time, and maybe I'm trying to make up for a little bit for that now.
Well, I think it's never too late to start. And what are you doing now that fills your bucket in that way?
Oh, yeah, the biggest things, yeah, the AOG chapter presidency and, and helping undergrads transition. I can't tell you how many, fellow grads I've talked to, as they're, looking for skill bridge, trying to figure out what that next step looks like. yeah, it doesn't stop. Like, everyone's hitting their 5 years coming up. Like it happens every year, right? So there's always that influx. Especially those that aren't flying. Like, it's tough making that jump. It's a scary world out there. And like I said, it's just I feel you said you yourself that no, me, myself, and I. It's whatever the opposite of that is.
Exactly.
It's like, hey, I know I didn't feel like I had the resources when I was initially getting out. Like through like traditional means of the Air Force. So it's like, hey, like I want to be that person that's like, "Hey, I'll offer that olive branch anytime." So yeah, love to help out however I can.
Well, those connections are so important, and I think one of the things I really appreciate about you, Jake, is really recognizing that connection. I think you even shared with me a story, and maybe you can share it here about how you still are in touch with your sponsor family.
Yeah,
Is that
so,
right? Yeah.
yeah, I went to high school in the Springs for a little bit, and, the best man in my wedding, his family was the one that sponsored me, so, he had sponsored cadets for years, sponsoring the basketball team through the 2000s, and then in high school, he made me a bet. He's like, "Hey, like, you idiot, if there's any way that you get in, like, I'll sponsor." He's like, "I'm done sponsoring cadets, but if you make it in, you'll be my last one," and
You
so
were the exception for him.
yeah, I was the exception to the rule. So, yeah, we still get together every year to go to the opening round of March Madness. So, we just did Lexington, Kentucky for those games, and then next year we'll be doing Tampa. So, yeah, college sports and that competition that you talked about, that's a huge centerpiece of my life, and I center all my travel and my fun around it. So, yeah, they've been awesome and a huge part of why I am or where I am today as well.
I love that. Well, we're going to ask for Jake's final thoughts next. But before we do, I'd like to take a moment and thank you for listening to Long Blue Leadership. The podcast publishes Tuesdays in both video and audio and is available on all your favorite podcast platforms. Be sure to stay in touch, watch, subscribe, and listen to all episodes of Long Blue Leadership at longblueleadership.org. All right, Jake, we're ready to hear your final thoughts. It's been incredible spending time with you today.
I appreciate it, Navir. Now, this is very humble to be here. You just had Secretary Wilson. I'm sure you've had some astronauts and generals on here. So the fact that you picked me, I was just like, man, that really means a lot. So I just want to say thank you. Yeah, I don't want to repeat myself too much, but yeah, any fellow grads, if you're ever in the Austin area, love to meet up, grab a beer, whatever we can do to help each other out, whatever we can do to get back to the long blue line.
Well, thank you for never being too busy for our graduates. I think that was one of the things that really stood out to me throughout everything you've shared is, you care about people and it's really translated to how you care about our fellow graduates. And I can't wait to see all the amazing things you'll continue to do. So thanks for being a leader in our long blue line.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Navir. Thank you so much.
Well, Jake, one more time, thank you again. And I'm Navir Walkowitz. Thank you for joining us on Long Blue Leadership. Until next time. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Long Blue Leadership. The podcast drops every 2 weeks on Tuesdays and is available on all your favorite podcast apps. Send your comments and guest ideas to us at socialmedia@usafa.org and listen to past episodes at longblueleadership.org.